direction, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the presentation over to your presenter. You may begin.
Good afternoon, SHRM Long Island and the Long Island employers. It's Chris Valentino from Jackson Lewis, and welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn webinar. We are going to kick off this new series, I should say breakfast series, with different concept. What we've tried to do here is create the guide to the Long Island Employer's Guide to Doing Something. Today I'm getting a lot of phone calls now, people ramping up for evaluation time. So I thought it would be good for us to go through the nuts and the bolts of doing performance evaluations, best practices and things to avoid. Before getting started, what I thought we would do is just remind everybody on the call that the first session of the 2017-18 Long Island Breakfast Series, hosted at the Melville Marriott, which is sponsored by SHRM Long Island, is scheduled for October 19th, and that will be the Long Island Employer's Guide to the Onboarding Process. We will talk about hiring, and we will talk about job descriptions and background checks, and make sure everybody is using the right forms and the best forms when onboarding, and considering all of the necessary things that they should be considering to select the right people for openings. The series looks good. You can, it's available on the SHRM website, the SHRM Long Island website. It's also available on the Jackson Lewis website. If you need a link to it, you can certainly email me. But we have filled the series with a couple of Long Island employer guides. We're going to be doing, which is one that we really feel strongly that there's a lot of need for, the Long Island Employer's Guide to Effective Workplace Investigations, the Long Island Employer's Guide to Wage and Hour Compliance, the Long Island Employer's Guide to Disability Management, the Long Island Employer's Guide to Terminations. Filled in there, we're going to be doing a privacy session. We want to make sure every employer is making sure that they are protecting themselves from a cyber threat. We're going to talk about immigration. We'll do our year in the review, an administrative roundup, and in addition, we will talk about employment litigation throughout the series. So that starts October 19th. We will start the East End Breakfast Series in January, which is when we usually do it. January 18th, we'll start at out in Riverhead. Again, if anybody needs the schedule, just email me. All right, so today, the Long Island Employer's Guide to Performance Evaluations. Let's start out by talking about what is the document that's most likely to be used against you by terminated employees. You guessed it. It's the performance evaluation. Why is that the case? Well, from my experience and from my perspective, it's because some employers and some supervisors take this process very seriously. Most of them see it as an obstacle that we need to get through at the end of the year, and we just get through it. We don't make them as candid as they need to be. We don't make them as direct, and we don't use them as the tool that they are intended to be. All right. What is a performance evaluation? It is, in my opinion, the most important responsibility of a manager. Why? Because it is the most important work day of the year for your employee. You have a captive audience. You have somebody who is ready to understand the expectations of the company, and we're going to measure how well they did against those expectations. And it is an opportunity to formally correct issues with performance. And with your good employees, it is an opportunity to build a better, more loyal employee by having a very positive experience in the performance evaluation, right? What are some common pitfalls before I get through the process? These are the types of things that I see when reviewing performance evaluations that as HR professionals, we should be looking to make sure our company doesn't fall into. Some of the common pitfalls include supervisors who apply a halo effect to their employees. Well, this employee has 10 responsibilities. They really do a great job on the most important one, so therefore they're going to get a good evaluation. The other 9 responsibilities, they're not that great, all right? The reverse of that is the horn effect. If 9 or 10 responsibilities fall on this employee and they do a really good job, they're so effective in everything, but one of them is one where they're really deficient, we allow that one criteria or that one performance metric to taint the entire evaluation. Remember, you are evaluating the performance in its totality. You're not evaluating the person, you're not evaluating the specific individual as he applies to one of the responsibilities. You're looking at it from a global perspective and say, how did you do from this period, January 1st, 2017, to this period, December 31st, 2017? Central tendencies. Everybody is just going to get a meets expectations, so I don't have to have a tough conversation. That's not good. Recency. You know what? I really didn't do my job this year by managing performance throughout the 12 months, so over the last 3 weeks, this person has been a really good employee. They're going to get and exceeds expectations. Absolutely not good. Favoritism. I like this person. Even though he or she doesn't do the job great, they're really nice. I'm going to give them a good evaluation as opposed to somebody who may not be in my good camp. Bias, allowing certain biases, whether or not they're unconscious or conscious, to affect somebody's evaluation. Whether you're using subjective opinions about somebody's personality or a protected characteristic to affect the evaluation. Grouping, excusing below standard employees because of the fact that everybody's not good. Well, I'm doing the best I can with what I got, and they're all terrible, so I guess they're all getting a meets expectations because there is no differentiating factor. Let me tell you something. You are just going to compound workplace issues by grouping everybody together and not focusing on a true evaluation. Guilt by association. Well, this person's really a poor employee, and they hang out with this person, and therefore, you know what, they're all going to be bad. Or this department is really bad, despite the fact that this person is really good. He or she is not going to get a good evaluation because the department is suffering. Not good. Holding grudges, self-explanatory. The sunflower effect. You know what? I am so good at my job as a supervisor that everybody under me is going to get a good evaluation because of the fact that's going to reflect good on me, and it's not accurate. So these are a couple of pitfalls. When you see them, address them. Don't allow your supervisors or managers to continue them. Let's spend a little time talking about the evaluation process. I boil the evaluation process down into 3 different parts. It's the before the meeting, it is the meeting, and it's the after meeting. All right. The first part, the written evaluation. Let me ask you a question. How many of your supervisors actually prepare to write out the performance evaluation of the employee? Do they prepare for it, or do they just sit down and they take the evaluation and off of their memory they fill out, this, and this, and they write a narrative that's very conclusive and doesn't include specifics? It's not a good way of doing it. And what you're doing is punting on a very valuable process to come and meet with the employee and give the accurate and transparent feedback. In terms of preparing for the written evaluation, what should you be doing? A supervisor should be sitting down and looking at that job description and saying, what am I measuring this employee against? These are the stated requirements of this job. That's what the focus of the evaluation should be. How well did the employee meet those stated expectations? And if you find that your evaluation is not accurately laying out those expectations, it is our job as human resources professionals to revise the job description. We need to be using these as a tool to be clear on what the expectations are, not as something that, well, we checked off the box, yeah, that job has a description, all right? Are we looking at previous evaluations? How did we leave off in 2016? Did we say to John or Chris or Jennifer or Beth, whatever it is, hey, we need you to improve on X, Y, and Z? If we said that at the end of last year, now we should be measuring against what we expected of them. Did they improve? Look at the personnel file. Over the last year, did we have problems? Were there any accolades included in their personnel file? You should be aware of these things. General impressions and examples. Maybe you're not the only person who works with the employee that you're completing the evaluation for. Should you be discussing it with other managers or supervisors who can opine on the performance? All right? When you write it, remember, supervisors must be evaluating the performance over the last 12 months, not the employee. Focus on the performance. If you are reviewing from an HR perspective evaluations completed by a supervisor that is focused on the individual, Chris is not a hard worker. That is not acceptable. You need to lay out the reasons why related to the performance that you reach the conclusion that Chris is not a hard worker or he's underperforming. All right? We stay objective, never make it subjective. Objectively speaking, this is the policy violations. This is where the person is doing well or not well as related to the job description. Don't make it subjective. There should be no eyes included in the write-ups. Using specific examples. Every conclusion that a supervisor puts into a job evaluation must be supported with specifics. Conclusions by themselves hang out there to die, and they ultimately become a very useful tool for plaintiffs' attorneys to attack during a litigation. Why did you reach this conclusion? You didn't have any specifics in here. Do you often reach conclusions without specifics? Boy, that's a tough question to answer during deposition. And don't forget, this should be all-inclusive in terms of a process. You need to include both the positives and the negatives. Too often we focus on the negatives and we forget to tell people where they're really excelling. When writing, do not, as I said earlier, use conclusions without specific examples. Bad attitude, unsatisfactory work performance. Chris is unproductive. Chris is not a team player. It doesn't appear as if Chris cares, Chris is not motivated. All these are conclusions, and they're meaningless. But if you were to say, Chris, on 4 occasions when asked by a coworker, refused to help out when Chris had completed his job tasks, and here are the dates that it happened, now that means a lot more than Chris is just not a good team player, all right? And never, ever, ever get personal in your evaluations. Make sure that your supervisors are not making assumptions. Make sure everything is fact-based, all right? Part of the preparation process to avoid supervisors just sitting down and filling out forms without doing all of the necessary prep work. Do not prepare evaluations cold, and certainly do not make all of your evaluations the same. You sort of fall into the grouping pitfall that we discussed earlier. What about the meeting? So we've thought about the employee, we've prepared the written evaluation, we are ready to go, and now we are going to meet with the employee. You must remember that this is the most important workday of the year for this individual. You must treat it as such. You must give that employee your greatest asset, the time to go down formally and talk about performance. Are you selecting the right location? Are you sitting in your office, looking at your email, answering your phone, texting a friend while you're giving somebody a performance evaluation? If you are, something is broken. You are not treating an employee like an asset. What you need to be doing is closing the computer, leaving the phone, shutting the ringer off, putting the smartphone away, and focusing on that person and talking to them about their performance. Get out from behind your desk. Psychologically sitting at a round table to make sure they understand it's a discussion and not a supervisor to subordinate, directive is good sense. Are we selecting the right time for this? So I have an employee, I got to do the performance evaluation. The person leaves at 5. I know that the person has to get home to get 3 kids off of a late bus. Let me schedule this meeting at 10 to 5 so we can really rush through it and I don't have to have any tough conversations. If that's what we're doing, it's broken. Don't do the evaluation. It's not worth it. Sit down during your time. Sit down during the workday where you're not rushed and you can have a back and forth. And there is nothing else on the employee's mind and your mind other than having a very clear and transparent discussion about evaluation and about how well they're doing, right? Avoid interruptions. Tell your assistant, whomever could come in the door, this is closed door, please don't come in unless the place is burning. You know what, let me have my 15, 20, 30, whatever it is, minutes so that we could talk about evaluation, right? And is your meeting timely? If we say we're going to do evaluations at the end of October and November, why are we waiting until January? What's the reason? Your employees deserve a timely evaluation and be true to what you lay out in the yearly agenda. If there is a supervisor who is avoiding having these meetings, there is a deeper reason. I do not want to have a negative conversation. I'm not prepared for this. This makes me feel comfortable. Help the supervisor, hold hands and say, we got to get this done. Even if it's a tough conversation, let's practice, let's go through it, but let's make sure that we're having timely meetings, all right? I always apply the Oreo effect to any performance evaluation meeting that I'm having, even when it's an evaluation meeting that's going to result in a performance improvement plan or asking somebody to leave. You start positive, you end positive. There are positives about everybody. Put the negative stuff in the middle so that you can walk away and have an understanding, a meeting of the minds, and you can shake hands at the end, all right? Don't be afraid to coach during this evaluation. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We should be trying to build a better employee through the performance evaluation process. And don't be afraid to listen in addition to talking. This should be a discussion. It is not a dictatorship. You should hear. It should be an opportunity for you to find out a little bit about how you are managing. All right, so treat it as a two-way street. At these meetings, do not negotiate. Do not make changes to these evaluations on the spot. You know, if an employee says, I don't think that that's fair for this reason, that reason, okay, I'll change it. That puts you in a very, very poor spot. It loses, the whole process loses credibility. It is absolutely okay for you to say, I will take into consideration what you are saying. And after, if you decide that based on the information that you've gathered from the employee as well as your reflection and review of other documents, you're going to change the evaluation, let that employee know that the evaluation is going to be changed after a thorough thought process. Do not change things on the fly, all right? Don't let, just because somebody's been there 20 years, they're going to get a good evaluation, or you're going to short circuit the evaluation. Don't let seniority dictate. Don't generalize, don't dictate, and as I said earlier, don't get personal, all right? You can see I have a roadmap for how these meetings should go. We've discussed them. I want to pull you to that bottom bullet. Don't get sidetracked. If you are giving an evaluation, or a supervisor is giving an evaluation that could be seen as negative or critical, sometimes what the employee will do is say, well, the reason why I'm not performing well is because I'm in a hostile work environment, or I'm being discriminated against, or I think you and or the supervisor is retaliating against me, all right? It's deflection. It's, I know I'm not performing well, but let me see if I can get you off of my performance and sidetrack you into something that may scare you into inaction. The right way to handle a deflecting employee is to say, oh, okay, this is the first time I'm hearing about this complaint. We will deal with that. But let's focus on your performance now. Let me get through this. And then separate with human resources, we can talk about your allegation. Stay focused, stay on path. The most valuable aspect of the performance evaluation is the part of the process that is most often missed and neglected and ignored. And that part is the follow-up. When you have a performance evaluation with somebody and you lay out a game plan, you should be tickling your calendar to revisit this 2 months, 6 months, 8 months down the road so that you can take it back out and say, this is what we talked about in November and in December. And let's see, did you meet these criteria? Have you gone through? Do you need help? You're not meeting the goal. You're not meeting the plans, or you are. You're doing a great job on these aspects of it. Do we do that? Do we follow up with people? Do we make them feel as if we're vested in their career by being true to what we talked about at the end of the year? And if you say you're going to do it by a certain date, then do it. If you say we're going to reconvene at the end of a 3-month period of time, Don't do it at the end of 5 months. Do it at the end of 3 months and monitor it day to day. It is so much better when employees are not surprised by what you have to communicate. You do that by having little conversations throughout the year. If the first time the employee is hearing about his or her performance is at your performance meeting, and you're choosing that as the one and only time to discuss performance, we're doing something wrong. It needs to be a culmination. The performance evaluation needs to be a culmination of management throughout the year. Avoid traps throughout this whole process. If you have a supervisor who doesn't have a lot of information about a new employee who's just transferred to him or her, then don't have them complete the evaluation. Get the evaluation information from somebody who does know. Don't be afraid to put not applicable on your evaluation forms. You may have, supervising others and evaluating people with supervising others. Well, maybe they don't supervise other people. Don't make up an answer, all right? Just put not applicable. Avoid using general language. Avoid the lack of preparation, and don't be afraid of conflict, all right? That's what sometimes this management becomes a part of. Best practices, as you can see, obviously, honest, fairness, be respectful, giving feedback, but be constructive. Don't be afraid to give positive feedback. Recognize progress. All of these things are important, but the most important bullet on this page is the third one. No surprises. When you blindside an employee, all of a sudden you're making him or her defensive, and it's more likely that a defensive employee is going to bring a lawsuit than one that understands. Even if they feign not understanding, if you're not surprising them, we're going to be in much better shape. Ask yourself and ask your supervisors this: if you're giving a critical evaluation, will the employee be surprised when we sit down and give them this criticism? And the answer is yes, we failed. The employee didn't fail. All right. Such an important process. Take it very seriously. It's a good opportunity when October rolls around to prep your management team on effective performance evaluations. All right. I look forward to seeing you in October for the breakfast series, and certainly we'll continue the Long Island Guide, Long Island Employers Guide, as we do these lunch and learns. Have a great weekend. If there's any questions, just email me or call me. Thanks. Bye-bye.